Hello, everyone. Welcome to Shift. Real stories, real people, real transformation. I've just met this delightful woman named Meryl Cook. Meryl and I were introduced by a mutual friend, aka Mary Jane Copps, who's also been a Shift guest. And we both have so much respect for Mary Jane. And when she suggested Meryl as a guest, I jumped at the opportunity to get her on camera and get her to share some of her story. We both live in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia, Canada, but we've never met, and hope to change that soon, that we will get together and have a cup of coffee or tea or something. So Meryl, you've got an interesting story to tell. So let's start by you just introducing yourself and what you used to do, who you used to be, that kind of thing. And before we jump in, everybody, you are going to notice some beautiful hooked rugs hanging on Meryl's wall behind her, which is part of the tapestry of her story. So, Meryl, over to you.
Oh, thanks so much, Sheila. And thank you for inviting me. I always trust when Mary Jane Copps recommends something that it's going to be good for me. So I'm really pleased to meet you. And I know we tried to connect, you and I, before the pandemic, and then it never quite happened. So here we are a few years later, and I'm so pleased to be on your show on Shift. It's a wonderful concept. So introducing myself, I'm a fiber artist, and I'm a host and creator of a new webcast series called Renegade Conversations, and I've recently launched a line of wearable art. But where I started from, I guess, is my first shift, as we were chatting earlier, Sheila. So in 2015, I had breast cancer. I was diagnosed with breast cancer, and I had been a homeopath for over 20 years at that point. And I was getting a bit burnt out. The year before, I'd had another sort of life wake-up call. I'd crashed my son's motorcycle on the Waverley Road, having been too tired to have continued my journey. Anyway, when I was diagnosed with breast cancer, it was quite momentous in that I had this deep sense of knowing once I got the first mammogram back, and they said, come back again. I thought, oh, okay, I guess I've got breast cancer. I just sort of had this knowing that that's what was happening. And I immediately went into thinking, okay, so what am I going to do about it? And how am I going to deal with this? And so I started thinking, okay, well, if it really is positive, then I think I'm going to leave my practice, because I've had enough of dealing with other people. I loved my patients, and I loved homeopathy. It was something that really interested me, and I got into it as a mother, as a mother looking for health solutions for my kids who were having recurrent ear infections and other things. So anyway, I started studying and then had this wonderful 20-year practice. But when I was diagnosed, I realized that it was time for a change. And also I knew that as a homeopath, I knew that breast cancer is illness at a very deep level. I mean, cancer in general is illness at a very deep level. And I'd seen so many of my patients go through a similar diagnosis and then recover from the surgery and the treatment and go right back into their old crazy lifestyle. And I knew I didn't want to do that. I knew that it was really an opportunity to make a change in my life, to heal on a deeper level than just to have the surgery, the radiation, and recover. I wanted more than that. So I made the decision to close my practice. And it was a tough one, but it also was a very clear decision. There was no question in my heart about what I needed to do. So I closed my practice, and I had absolutely no idea what I was going to do with the rest of my life. I I just didn't know what I was going to do, but I thought I really needed to step into that. And it was like stepping off a cliff. You know, I'd always been a woman who had all my plans laid out. I was very goal oriented. I always knew where I was going next, or where I thought I was going next. And this was the first time that I'd really just embraced the idea of, I need to heal and I need to figure it out. And so I started to hook at my frame. I hook on a big Shetty Camp frame. It's kind of like a floor frame, and I sit at it. And I decided.
I'm going to interrupt you for just a moment.
Yeah.
I've hooked one rug in my life, so I would guess there are people that when you say hook, you know, I started hooking.
Yes.
They may not understand what that means. They may think it means something else.
Exactly.
And for people who are not from Nova Scotia, Shetty Camp, I will tell you, is a place in Cape Breton, Nova Scotia, which is rather famous for rug hooking, right?
Yes.
So my apologies for interrupting.
No worries. And the type of frame I use is a Shetty Camp frame, but my hooking is quite a bit different from the Shetty Camp hooking, and is quite different from a lot of other people's hooking, because I basically have developed my own style. So anyway, I started sitting at my frame and hooking every day, and also writing in a journal every day. I had the week that I had finished my radiation, I was invited to a workshop in River John, and it was hosted by author Sherry Fitch, who is very famous in Canada for her wonderful writing, and also a yoga teacher, Josette Coulter, and they were talking about the interplay between writing and yoga, and how writing, the act of writing, can help to unblock the mind, and yoga helps to unblock the body. And when you do them both together, magical things happen. So anyway, I started journaling from that day forward, and I had really only ever journaled in high school before. I'd never done it. So over the course of sort of 8 months, I hooked and wrote every day, and hooked 7 what I called healing mats, and each mat was the next step that I needed to take in my healing. So I think often as women in particular, we try to make all our plans and figure out everything all at once. And I knew that I couldn't do that, and I knew that I needed to just take it really one step at a time and figure out what is the next step. And that idea is what led to my first book, which is called One Loop at a Time, a story of rug hooking, healing, and creativity. And so my second book also is called One Loop at a Time, the Creativity Workbook. But so you can see that one loop at a time is very much a theme in my life, and in terms of how I move forward. So I started that. I wrote my book. My book ended up invitations to teach at the Center for Craft and Design. I started speaking. I wrote a second book. I took myself on a cross-Canada speaking tour, and organized events all the way along, and just promoted my book and spoke to people. And one thing kind of led to another. I started to do some corporate work, where I was working with teams to promote engagement. I even had some teams like Adsum House hook a rug that spoke about their vision for their organization. The one that I did recently with Adsum House was they hooked a large sunflower as a team. So I brought my equipment in, and they hooked for a number of weeks and produced this. And it's now hung in the Sunflower House, the new house in Spryfield that they built. So
wow, that's amazing. And again, Adsum House is a house. It's a shelter for abused women. So what a beautiful project. I just love that.
It was amazing. And their staff are, the directors invited me because the staff have been very overburdened, especially during the pandemic and since, with all the pressures on housing and all the social pressures. And so the staff are really running ragged. and she felt that that it would be a good idea to really support the staff with something creative, something they could do with their hands and that they could do together. And yeah, so it was wonderful.
Wow, yes, I can see I can see boardrooms with their logo,
Yeah,
hooked on the wall. It's
yeah,
yeah, there's so many opportunities there.
there really
And
was.
yeah, and what you've told us so far is a wonderful theme that I'm seeing developing with all the guests that I've had so far, which only a handful, but it's that just that there's some kind of inner knowing about what to do next.
Mhm.
And I want to honor you for recognizing that and closing down your practice. I can really understand how difficult that was, and yet you
Mhm.
felt it was absolutely necessary. And I love the concept of one loop at a time.
Mhm.
It's like I immediately thought it's a wonderful metaphor for one step at a time.
It really is. And the other thing about one loop at a time that I think is quite fitting is that when you hook, you use a small hook and you either use yarn or fabric, and you really basically only pull up one loop at a time. And so that's once you can pull one loop, you know how to rug hook. And I think and then it's all just finessing and seeing what feels good and what you love to do. And I really have applied that whole concept to how I move forward with my business. So, for example, Mary Jane suggested to me last year I really should do a webcast, and I thought, oh, I don't know. And then she said, well, you get to reach out to other renegade women and have conversations, and we thought, oh, maybe I could call it Renegade Conversations, and it has been so much fun, and I feel like all the decisions I'm making these days are based on, does it make my heart sing? And if it doesn't, it's not happening. Because in the past with my business, anytime I made a decision because I thought it was a logical, could bring in some cash flow, whatever, it never panned out for me. I think I know for other people it works, but for me it was always, it's always been, if my heart isn't in it, if I don't feel excited and invigorated about it, it doesn't really go anywhere. So, yeah.
Well, it's interesting because that is a phrase that I use as well. Does
Mm.
it make my heart sing? And
Yeah.
as I look at those beautiful wall hangings behind
Mhm.
you, I've got a feeling that that process really connects you to your heart space.
It really does.
Yes, and I mentioned to you, I hooked one rug,
Nice.
uh,
We'll
and
have to
I got
remedy
a
that.
kit.
You'll have to
I got
have
a
more
kit.
than one.
They were pretty popular at the time. I got a kit,
Uh-huh.
but I tell you that rug is still in amazing shape. It was wool fiber,
Uh-huh.
and I'm still proud of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
It's
I
wonderful.
understand the concept of you do one loop, that's it, and you
Yep.
just keep going and going, and I know those ones on your wall didn't come from a kit.
No.
They
No.
came from your heart.
Yes.
Yeah,
So I could tell you a little bit about this one in particular. So
sure.
this rug is about hearts connecting, and I had written a series of letters to one of my sons who was going to federal prison, and it was a very painful time for me and for him, and I had written him letters about my hopes for him. And so each layer was a little love letter of my hope for him. And I started to hook it when he actually went to prison. And the parts, there's a heart here and there's a heart above. And it's called this cord that binds us. And it's about this invisible cord that binds me to him and him to me, even when we're apart. And it's a cord of love as opposed to a cord of responsibility or a cord of attachment, that kind of thing. So it was a very profound experience, probably the most profound experience that I've had in creating a rug. And it really got me through a lot of the time that was so difficult with our separation. So,
Well, it was another time of shift,
mhm,
really.
mhm,
I'm a mother of one, and my
mhm,
son actually had cancer when he was 17.
mm,
So when you talk about that cord of love that
mhm,
exists between a mother and a son,
mhm.
I get it. I
Yeah,
really get it, and
yeah,
I
yeah,
get the pain of, the letting him go to that place
yeah.
called prison.
Mhm,
Yeah, I mean, we all build prisons in our minds, but
mhm.
yeah, wow.
Yeah, and I mean, even to let your son go through the treatments when there's absolutely nothing you could have done to change other than to be there. And that was my option was to be there for him. But basically it was his journey. And so when our family is suffering like our children, there is this cord of love. Yeah.
Yes, and I was at a spiritual type conference, and one of the speakers mentioned that the bond between a mother and son is stronger than any other bond, even between a
Interesting.
father and a son or a mother and a daughter.
Huh.
And I don't know if that's true or not, but it
I don't know.
certainly feels true to me that,
I have three sons, and I feel very connected to all of them. I
uh,
didn't ever get a daughter, so yeah.
me either. I got the perfect child, so I stopped. I'm sure all your children are perfect as well. They
They
all,
are.
yeah,
They're wonderful guys. Yeah, they're
perfect in their own
wonderful
way.
men. Yeah.
Well, we could talk for hours just about that.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Wow. So tell me more about this renegades thing. This is really interesting.
Well, I started hooking a series called Wild Women, and so and those were about uh, looking inside and becoming your inner wild self. And it really was a bit autobiographical in that it was all the issues that I'm working on and writing in my journal about. And so it's like Wild Woman speaks to herself with love. Wild Woman driving across country to meet kindred spirits. So those are some of the wild women. And then I started um, thinking about renegade women in particular, especially after when Lisa LaFlamme, the former CTV correspondent, when she lost her job, when her job ended, I started to hook a series of rugs called Ode to Lisa LaFlamme, and they were all gray-haired women having absolutely great times and having lots of attitude. And so I didn't know Ms. LaFlamme at that point, and someone introduced me to her and told her about my rugs, and I ended up making her a personal rug for herself. And so then when I got the idea from Mary Jane to start Renegade Conversations, I thought, well, all she can say is no. So I reached out to Lisa and I said, would you be my first guest? And she said yes, which was just amazing. So that was just about this time last year, because I recorded it in September last year. And I had invited her in June. And I couldn't believe she said yes, but she did. And she was so incredibly generous, and even so generous that when we did the interview, I forgot to press record. We did the whole interview, and then we had to do it again. And she was so gracious. It was just amazing. So anyway, so I started Renegade Conversations because I thought it would be fun. It was another way to try to get my artwork in front of more people. But also, I was really interested in meeting many of the women that I've admired over time, or have been doing things outside the box that really attracted me. And I thought, what a great way to have a really in-depth conversation and try to build a community. And that seems to be what's happening. So, I've been building a community in terms of my followers, but also in terms of these women that I'm connecting with, and many of them I'm still in touch with. And like, for example, Martha Chavez, the Canadian comedian, was a guest. She was my second guest, which is even more amazing. And she recently came to Halifax to do a show at Yuck Yucks. And so we met and, took a photo, and we've been exchanging emails, and it's just fabulous, to be meeting these women that I admire, and that I think people deserve to hear about. And one of the things in Renegade Conversations is I didn't want to do your standard interview. I wanted to get to know these women as people, like so some of my questions are, have you always been a renegade? And what are some of the good things about being a renegade? And what are some of the challenges that maybe you faced? And then I have some fun questions, which is, so it's really kind of getting to know.
How do you define a renegade woman?
Well, to me, a renegade is somebody who steps outside the box, who uses her voice, whether it's quietly or loudly, to make a difference, really, and to take a stand. So they're not afraid to question the norms if the norms no longer make sense. In the dictionary, renegade can have some very negative meanings. It's about people who've been disloyal and leaving their faith and those kinds of things, which has been a bit of a challenge with a couple of my guests. So I interviewed the former Lieutenant Governor Mayan Francis recently, and her first response was, "Well, I looked up renegade. I'm not a renegade," because she's not a person who breaks rules, but she is a person who, she was the first of many things in her life as a Black woman, as a politician. She's done amazing things. And so when I explained to her that it's really about being willing to use your voice and stand up and step out, and usually with a sense of purpose to make the world a better place, is kind of, I would say, the unifying theme between all of the renegades that I've spoken with. So, yeah.
And I'm hearing there's a generosity of spirit that, those of us in Canada are very familiar, most of us, I think, with Lisa LaFlamme's story. And I think you said it very nicely, that she lost her job or something. Well, she was famous in Canada. And, a beautiful woman, and she let her hair go gray. That seemed to be the big, she used to color her hair, and then during COVID, she stopped coloring it. Yeah. And beautiful woman, beautiful gray hair, and that seemed to be the catalyst for getting very publicly dumped by a major television network in Canada. I mean, many of us were outraged. So her generosity of spirit, I think, reflects on your own generosity of spirit, that you can attract you didn't have to make her a hooked rug. No. But you did.
I wanted to, yeah.
Yes. Again, following your heart, one loop at a time, and turning it into a series. And I've discovered that, and you and I talked about this a bit, that these are the people that really are generous with who they are. It's more than their time. Yes. It's about, I think, them following their own heart and what's calling them and their purpose, as you say. So thank you for the beautiful work that you're doing with your Renegade broadcast. And I'll certainly put that in the show notes, that how people can find you.
Thank you.
And I think something else is coming out of your creative spirit. Tell us about that.
So this spring, what I did was I launched a line of wearable art. So basically, I had all these beautiful photos of my hooked art. And so I found a website, found a company in Montreal who actually makes clothing based on photographs. So it's what I do is I upload a photograph from my work, and then they place it on clothing, and then we decide, does it work or does it not work, and then they make the clothing, and it's all made in Montreal by sewers. It's a bit of a cottage industry, so they print one at a time. They send it to a local person who sews it and sends it back. I mean, it's really quite wonderful. It's part of, there's I think a trend that's really good for the environment in terms of slow fashion, which really appeals to me. So it's pieces there is minimal waste because they only make one, and they only make it when they have a sale or an order for it, and it takes a little longer than just popping out to the mall and grabbing a piece off the rack, but that it's employing someone at a fair wage, and it's being done locally, which is exciting. So it's been really exciting to get these clothes. So it's in some of the pieces, you can actually see each little loop that I've pulled. So it depends on what type of photograph I upload. The piece I'm wearing today is it's a kimono, and it's basically was an out of focus photo, but you can see on parts of it, you can see the actual loops, and so it's as an artist, it's quite thrilling to see my work on this type of a canvas, and so I'm enjoying it. I'm doing a pop-up tomorrow as we're recording, and I'm doing a series of little pop-up sales. So it's a lot of fun.
Yes, if it's not fun and it doesn't come from your heart, Meryl doesn't do it.
Exactly.
It's that simple.
Yeah.
Well, I love that your wearable art is also made in Canada.
Me too.
I would guess that if you sent it offshore, that it would possibly be much cheaper, but it wouldn't have the heart of Meryl.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you again for supporting Canadians and Canadian businesses with your artwork.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That was really important to me. And also when you send things offshore, there's often a difficulty with quality control. And as an artist, with people copying your designs without any attribution. So so I thought this company is very reliable and very trustworthy. And
yes. Well, you've got some business sense as well. So kudos for that as well.
Thank you.
So Meryl, thank you again. I'm wondering if you have any words of wisdom that helps people connect with that heart space that you so wisely stay connected with. What would you say to someone who said, well, how do you connect with your heart?
That's a really good question. So there's a few ways to get started, I think. One way is to start to notice what brings you joy, or what makes your heart sing, and what makes you feel good. And then notice, how does my body feel when I feel that? And where do I feel it in my body? I think that's the first step in connecting with your inner self, is to figure out how our body feels. So I started doing that when I was walking to radiation every day. I would look for 5 things that brought me joy along the way, and then notice how my body felt. When I'm teaching, that will be the warm-up exercise I'll do with people, is to say, what brings you joy, and what does it look like? What does it feel like? You can even sketch, what does joy feel like, and where do you feel it? Because I think in our culture in particular, we spend a lot of time in our head, and not necessarily, we're in our heads and we're not connecting with our body, and so we're very separate from how do we actually feel, except when we feel stress, because we know exactly where we feel that and how that feels. But the good feelings we don't always identify with easily. So that's a good way to start, is noticing when you feel happiness, joy, ease, whatever it is that you're looking for, And then how does your body feel in that way? It helps you to be in the present. It helps to ground you, but it also helps to train your brain to look for joy and good things, because I think we see what we are looking for and what we're primed for. And so if you're primed for looking for beauty or looking for joy, you're going to see more of it, which is kind of wonderful. The other thing that people can do to start to connect with their inner self is to start writing, either in a journal or on their phone or wherever they want to write, and write about not just what irks you, but try to flip that situation. And if it was a reverse, so say I have a worry and I want to instead visualize, what would it be like to flip that? What would it be like to feel joy or excitement or whatever? And then what would that feel like? How would my body feel if that was the case? So it's an exercise in my book called What If, and it's like, what if something marvelous could happen? So you can write about problems and then flip them, or you can just write about thinking about marvelous things and how they might feel, and how would my body feel if that marvelous thing came true. So those are a couple ways to get started.
Very wise. And again, shifting.
Mm-hmm.
It's about shifting from the part of the mind that is focused on our problems and what's wrong, and thinking about what brings me joy. Yes, it's a real shift.
Yeah.
Is there anything you'd like to add, Meryl?
Well, I guess the only other thing you and I were talking about that I think is really relevant is that midlife, this time of our lives, is such a time of opportunity. It's a time to kind of reimagine what we want the next third of our life to be. Maybe not the next half, unless I live to 120. But what's my next third of my life, and how do I want that to be, and how do I want to feel? And it's this time of really freedom to reimagine our lives, now that our responsibilities have changed. And it's also a time when we care less, and maybe don't care at all, about what other people think of us. It's kind of, it's a real time of opportunity. And there are so many, we have lots of years, hopefully, to grow into our role as elder stateswomen. And so we have to figure out how we want to do that. And it's a real fun time.
Well, what a positive message to leave for everyone, because I was thinking the other day about retirement, and I don't even like that word. Why does anybody need to retire? It's like, as you say, the research is showing now that most of us live 20, sometimes 30 years beyond the official retirement age of 60 or 65. So it's a wonderful opportunity to rewrite the journey and open ourselves to the possibility of what we can do now, out of the box, as you talk about.
Exactly.
What's available to me now. And I really get that Meryl can help people in our age group look at that really from the perspective of what you're creating, one loop at a time, and not with the goal of controlling it, but to allow it to present itself. I love that.
Yeah, I do too. Yeah, I didn't mention, but I also do one-to-one work with individuals who are looking to get unblocked, and so you can find that on my website. Yeah.
And again, we'll put all the information you need to reach out to this beautiful woman. Thank you for sharing you with us today, Meryl.
Thank you very much for inviting me, Sheila. This has been lovely.
Thank you so much. So I'm going to stop recording.
Okay.